Blacks in Technology.
Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology.
Welcome everyone to the Blacks in Technology Bit Tech Talk podcast. This is episode number 107. Blacks in Technology Bit Tech Talk podcast is a show where we talk to black men and women who are engineers, innovators, educators, inventors, change makers, entrepreneurs, and tonight hip-hop artists doing amazing things in the world of technology. This podcast is where they share their stories, experiences, ideas, knowledge, and perspective on tech with the bit community. I am your host, Greg Greenlee, and if this is your first time listening to the podcast, you can check us out at the following URLs. We are at www.blacksintechnology.net. We are also on the Twitters, and that's at Black in Technology, BLKINTECHNOLOGY. We're also on Facebook, facebook.com/Blacks in Technology. We also have a LinkedIn group under Blacks in Technology. And if you are on Twitter right now, you have any questions for our guests, tweet them using the hashtag BitTechTalk, BITTECHTALK. Blacks in Technology is a tech-focused community and media organization focused on increasing diversity in technology through increased visibility and participation of people of color in tech. We're always focused on forming new partnerships and opportunities to assist our members with their continued professional growth and development. So if you'd like to partner with us in any way, send us an email to contact@blacksintechnology.net. All right, a couple of announcements. We still have our partnership with the Linux Foundation, and there's still Linux training available. So if you want to take advantage of the opportunity, check our website, do a search on our website for Linux or Linux Foundation, and you should see the sign up form for the Linux training and what trainings we have to offer. Also, we do have a Slack channel in case anyone wants to or didn't know and wants to join our ever-growing Slack channel. We are close to 1,000 members in our Slack group. If you want to join, there is a sign-up form that needs to be completed because it's invite only. So go to Blacks in Technology, and at the bottom of the page, there is an icon that says Slack. Click on it. It'll whisk you away to our sign-up form. Fill out the short form, and you will receive an automatic invite. So that's all taken care of behind the scenes. You don't have to do anything. I don't have to do anything either. Just sign a form, send it, and you'll get your invite in your email. All right. Tonight, I'm super excited about our guest tonight for a number of reasons, but mainly because, in case anyone didn't know, I do music as well. Not as much as I used to, but I do music here and there. And she is a incredible hip-hop artist, and she's also into science and technology. So I love seeing that representation across the lines. I love when people are doing things that they're passionate about, and it doesn't, and it shows us as not being this monolith that some people tend to think, right? So I love when those two worlds come together. So I want to introduce Sammus to the podcast. Thanks a lot for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really, really excited and honored to be a guest on the podcast.
Excellent. So I was discussing this before we went live, and I'm going to let everybody know I'm putting my super duper fan hat on tonight. And this is why. I had never heard of Sammus until a good friend of mine, Watson, he put a link to one of her songs in our Slack channel. And because he was in South by Southwest, and he happened to see Sammus along with a good friend of mine, in 80 from Dual Core, perform. And so I listened and I was blown away. And I don't get blown away often. Let's put that out there, because I'm an artist myself, and I know Sammus can probably attest to this. You know, when you are an artist, you kind of critique people, and you probably, at least for me anyhow, I look at music differently than what other people may look at it, right? So I'm critiquing, you know, when it comes to hip hop anyhow, I'm critiquing delivery, I'm critiquing cadence, I'm critiquing lyrics, flow, presence on the mic, all that stuff, right? And you know, beats and all that, you know, come as well. And when I heard your stuff, I was just like, wow, like your flow, your voice, your cadence, everything was super on point. And I could not stop listening. I listened. And so anyhow, I went and I downloaded, or I put all your albums in my Google playlist, adding them to my library. And let's put it like this. The people who I listen to, you know, I listen to some more mainstream people. You know, I love, you know, the Jay-Z's, the Nas, but I also listen to people that really take pride in, you know, their lyrics, right? So I'll listen to Elzai, or I'll listen to Royce the 5'9", or I'll listen to Jean Grey. I'll listen to these, you know, these people. And lately, I've been listening a lot of Royce, his new stuff, and like I had to put that stuff on pause, and I was just like listening to your stuff nonstop. So I'm saying that to say that I'm a super fan. Anybody who gets a chance to listen, check out her albums. I mean, it's incredible to me. So I just want to put that out there. Like I said, I was going to put my fan hat on. It's probably going to stay on for this entire podcast. So let's get into you. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Let's start off like tell us where you're from.
Yeah, so I'm from a little town in upstate New York. Usually when I say I'm from New York, most people are like, oh, which part of New York City? And I have to say, no, I'm not from New York City. It's more in western New York. It's called Ithaca, and it's home to a few different schools, Cornell University, Ithaca College, and that's where I spent most of my kind of childhood and even adult life, because that's also where I'm going to grad school. But yeah, that's kind of, I'm not sure if you want me to talk a little bit more about it, but that's the town that I'm from.
Okay, excellent. So yeah, so when I read your bio, and I don't know where I heard of Ithaca from, but I might be thinking of a different Ithaca anyhow. Yeah, it was. I seen New York, and I automatically related that to like, oh, okay, maybe Ithaca is like one of the boroughs in New York.
Yeah.
So no, it's not. It's from. Okay. So tell us a little. We're going to start with the tech side, the science and technology side of what you do. Yeah. So tell us a little bit how'd you get interested in technology?
So 100% the main kind of reason I ever have had for being engaged with technology has been because of music. Has been a deep love for music. So I played a lot of video games as a kid, like Nintendo, Super Nintendo was my favorite, and then PlayStation, and I was, really engaged with those systems, but I didn't see myself as being able to kind of create anything. So it was really from more of like a consumer standpoint. But I fell in love with video game music, and I wanted really badly to make music for a video game at some point. And so that was my entry. So I learned how to make music through the music production software Reason. My older brother taught me how to use Reason.
Right.
It's a software you can get for your Mac, or I think it's on multiple operating systems. And, one summer I just kind of made beats when I was in high school. That's all I did was make this video game music. And I also purchased the video game MTV Music Generator for PlayStation, which allows you to make beats, but you can't really export them. That was how I started. I didn't even think of it as like, oh, I'm learning tech. It was like, okay, cool, I'm learning to like express myself. And in the process of learning how to make music, I learned all of these cool things about, how sound works and how you manipulate sound, and eventually how to set up a mic and different kind of aspects of tech and sound, but it's always been through the world of music that my interest in tech has been the most pronounced.
Excellent. And you brought a smile to my face when you mentioned music generator. My brother is...
yeah, throwback.
Yeah, definitely, because I have a number of brothers, and they are all huge hip-hop fans, and a couple of them actually, they do hip-hop production. Okay. I definitely remember, I've always been like just the writer, the lyricist, but I definitely remember times where, they were making some super intricate beats with with the music generator.
You can really go in with music generator.
Yeah. So, as a matter of fact, and I have a younger brother, and I think he may still have a music generator. He may still have like the Nintendo and the music generator cartridge that he uses from time to time. So that's
dang.
Excellent. Yeah. But one of the things that really caught my attention with what you were saying was, I like to talk about this a lot on the podcast is when people think about technology and they have this thought in their mind, this image of, what a person looks like, who's into technology, and they think of it only in this one light. And so I thought it was really interesting that you brought that you mentioned, your passion for music is what kind of drove your passion for seeking out technology. And I think that's important because a lot of people shouldn't, they should know, or they need to know, that you don't necessarily, you don't have to be a programmer. It's not a prerequisite to be in technology, right? There's so many different avenues that you can pursue, and also pursue your passion for something else, and intertwine that with tech. And what I love most about it is the imagery that produces, right? So I always like to talk about changing perceptions. And when I say that, I like to mention changing perceptions from within our community, or how people view technology, and not only that, but how they view themselves, and that they don't have to be pigeonholed into some image that they feel they have to portray in order to be in tech. Like, hey, you can do hip hop and you can do music and you can still be into tech, right? And you may even be a programmer. Me, for instance, I'm an engineer, but I love hip hop, and I consider myself a hip hop artist as well, right? So there's these layers that people think that you have to shed in order to be in tech. They think that, and there was a time once where I was the same way. I wouldn't say it, in terms of portraying who I am to everybody, right? So I wouldn't tell people in tech that I did music, right? Like, especially coworkers, because you never, I had that. But now, right, and now I'm just like, yeah, I don't care. Yeah, I rap, and they're just like, what? And I'm like, yeah, I rap about tech too, and they're just like blown away.
Yeah.
And so I think that's very important that you're portraying that, and as well as that you're showing that your passion for both tech and music.
Yeah, and I mean, I think what's important about that, or important about having these kind of conversations, is, like you were saying, this reminder that, tech looks a lot of different ways. It's a lot of different things. Technology is a musical instrument. It's, it's sneakers. It's the design of sneakers. It's the design of clothes. It's all of these things that affect our lives and that people are passionate about, but they don't necessarily recognize the connections. And so they might kind of talk themselves out of, or think themselves out of, pursuing a particular career or interest because, I don't have the skills for that. But if you're interested in something, you'll learn the skills that you need to pursue it. So yeah, I think it's important.
So tell us, you talked about music being your entryway into tech early on. So how did that translate into you pursuing STEM as a major in college?
Yeah. So the field that I got my degree from Cornell University in the Science and Technology Studies department. So for folks that don't know what that is it's sort of, broadly speaking, it's a field that's interested in thinking about kind of social dynamics that emerge in terms of science and technology, and also histories of science and technology. And so, folks will often talk about, how anthropologists might go and study other cultures. A lot of SPS, or science and technology studies folks, will study like engineers or study doctors and think about computing culture and things like that and write cool, interesting pieces about that. So my entryway was, again, through music. I took a class my sophomore year it was called What is Science? And the person who was leading the course, we did a whole kind of section about the Moog synthesizer and the history of the Moog synthesizer. And basically what we kind of got out of that lesson was that we have to question ideas of progress, what progress means, and recognize the ways in which users and their needs and their demands and their ideas of what is good and right are deeply embedded in the technologies that we use today, that sort of human choice and conceptions of goodness are inherently embedded into the technologies that we use, and even in terms of musical instruments. And so he presented all of these different early designs on what the synthesizer could look like, and why we sort of focused on this one that resembles an electronic, like a keyboard or a piano, that wasn't necessarily the only model that could have emerged, but it was the one that consumers felt comfortable with because there was already a relationship with what a piano looked like and felt like. And that was so fascinating to me because, even in undergrad, I was making beats and stuff, making music. I didn't think about pursuing it professionally, but it was a huge part of my life. And it was cool to take a class where I could study things that were tied to like sound and music, but I didn't have to be in a music department because I wasn't formally trained, and I definitely didn't think I could tell my parents, hey, I'm going to school to pursue music. I didn't think they would get down with that. So it felt like a nice way for me to study the thing that I was like really passionate about, but also without limiting myself to only thinking about music and sound. So, in my department, we study things like bioethics. I've TA'd some courses on bioethics and other kind of interesting topics within science. So yeah, it's a very broad field, but my entryway was again through music and sound.
Interesting. I have a friend, Dr. Danielle Smith, and she it sounds a little bit kind of like what is I want to say it's human factors. It's kind of what she went to. What she went to school for, and it kind of sounds like a mix of some of that going on there.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot folks in the department. They come from such a wide variety of backgrounds. So you have some people. There's a couple of people in the department who came from. They were engineers. They were software engineers. They came in and they wanted to think about like histories of computing, histories of engineering. There are people who come in from kind of a predominantly social science backgrounds who kind of have to learn the science that they're talking about. So it's a nice meeting point for a lot of different fields.
Excellent. And you're an educator as well. Tell us a little bit. How did you get involved in teaching?
Yeah, so as part of so I'm pursuing my PhD right now, and as part of my PhD almost requirement and training, I'm required to TA some courses, so be a teaching assistant, but as well as teach my own courses to undergrads. So I've taught over the past grad school in 2011. So I've taught about three or four classes of my own that focus on sound studies, the field of sound technology and science. And that's been a really, really fun and interesting way for me to explore some of my ideas. But I've also been an elementary school educator in between undergrad and grad school. So I moved to Houston, Texas, right after I graduated, and I became a 3rd and 4th grade math and science teacher, and through the teaching program Teach for America. And that was a real experience too. It was a very humbling experience to work with. It was a predominantly black school. I was really excited to be there, and it was also really challenging. Just some of the things that the kids were facing. It was really, really. It made me sad. It made me angry about the state of the educational system, but it also was a beautiful thing to watch them overcome these ridiculous, terrible objective circumstances and just perform and succeed and be brilliant. So, yeah, those are my teaching experiences.
Excellent. So, tell us a little bit. Well, for one, how'd you enjoy Texas? We have a lot of people from Texas that's in our Slack our Slack group. Well, how'd you like your experience there?
I gotta say it was challenging at first. I'll say it was challenging. So I'm from upstate New York. I'm from this little town, and so it was just in terms of size, like purely in terms of size. Houston was sort of, I was shell shocked. I was really just the amount of time I spent driving from one place to the next. I was like, I cannot believe I'm still in the same city. I've been driving for at 70 miles per hour for 30 minutes. How am I still in the same place? So that was kind of wild to me. And then, culturally, there were a couple differences, and it was really, when I was in Houston, that's when I started rapping. Prior to that, I had only been a producer. And so it was challenging integrating myself into the sort of like hip hop scene, the music scene there. I found my people eventually, but it was just really spread out and kind of hard for me to like really, really get my feet on the ground until, right before I came back to New York. So
gotcha.
I will say that I love the weather and I love the food.
Gotcha. So you talked about, the educational system, how the state of the educational system, especially when it comes to young black girls and boys, how it kind of made you sad. So what are some, as an educator, what are some of the things that you would possibly change in the educational system if you could?
Well, I mean, I think most educators would say this, but, the emphasis around standardized testing is destroying the educational system, period. Like, the ways in which teachers are forced to teach so that students will be able to answer, specific kinds of questions that, the state determines as representing proficiency. It's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, I'm sure, can speak to this, but creativity is like paramount in the tech world, and schools do not at all allow space or time or energy for just thinking about how we can be creative, how kids can be creative or solve problems creatively.
Right.
They're presented with a certain kind of issue or a certain kind of problem, and we teach them the format through which they must, figure that problem out. And instead of allowing them kind of the freedom to work through a problem in the way that they work through it. And I mean, there were some instances where I was allowed to, we taught based on Howard Gardner's model of different forms of intelligence. So we would teach kids, not just by writing something on the board, but also by allowing them to use blocks or perhaps having a song or, all visual cues or, for kinesthetic learners, you have all kinds of ways for them to learn. But even so, the end goal was still so they can pass these standardized tests. So I think that was really, really, a challenge that I think I face and that most educators face. So you get funding, especially in Texas, No Child Left Behind. You get funding when your students pass these standardized tests. So from the principal down to, the teachers, you're all stressed and anxious about making sure that every single kid passes the test, whether they got the content or not. And that's, I think, the kind of biggest problem. And one other challenge that I face, and I'm not sure, how to address this or where we can address this, but, I was teaching third and fourth graders who are, 8 years old, 9 years old, and even that young, I had a girls' class and a boys' class, and in the girls' class, they already had confidence issues about math. They already were saying, like, I don't know how to do this. I can't do this. I'm not smart enough for this. And, it was really painful for me to see, like, wow, this starts so early. This starts so young. You have little girls already saying, I don't know how to do this. And I kept wondering, where is this coming from? How does this happen?
Right.
So, yeah, that's, I think, a really big challenge that we also face in terms of sort of gender disparities.
Yeah. It's so funny because I have two sons, and they're both in Montessori schools, and one going to the third grade, and the other one is going into kindergarten. And not me being an engineer probably, I'm pretty sure, helps with a lot of this because I stress the importance of school and education, but math in particular, because as you already know, like math, at least from an engineer standpoint, I would say, is a universal language, right? Like everything is built on math. So, and so I've never had to experience, I never had to have that experience where, a kid is like, hey, I just don't get math, or this, fortunately for me, my son is just incredible in math. As a matter of fact, he brought home a thing today where they said he was like 99th percentile in math, throughout the nation for kids.
Wow.
So I was just like, whoa, okay. So, it's really sad to even to hear that, at that early of an age that they are already losing confidence in themselves, in math or any subject for that matter, really.
Yeah, it's disheartening, but it is, it makes me recognize, again, the importance of films like Hidden Figures, right, or, like those representations are so critical because they, at the very least, put into the minds of young black women and young black kids, period, that, like, these are spaces that you belong in. Like, you're not just, an anomaly if you end up in these spaces. You're not, that there shouldn't be anything exceptional about a black person being in a tech space and thriving, that should be, a part of the norm. And I think that a movie like Hidden Figures helps us to imagine a universe in which that's the case.
I definitely agree, and I love what you just said about being an anomaly. You're not an anomaly. I think that's super important because this is something that, when I talk about blacks in technology, I always say that we exist so that we don't have to exist. And when I tell people that, sometimes they look at me. They look at me crazy, like, what do you mean? You don't want to exist as an organization? No. I don't want this to be. I don't want a disparity to be like this. 5 years from now, like this, it should be to the point that seeing a black man or a black woman in tech is nothing out of the ordinary. And once we get to that point,
right?
When we get to that point, then that's when we, I would say we've succeeded. And then an organization like mine can go away, and that's what I look towards.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's interesting because I think that's the model of a lot of great organizations that are doing work. I have my personal issues with Teach for America, which I won't get into right at this second, but I do think that their sort of underlying model is that we go into underserved communities to kind of destroy the educational, the gap that exists between, students who are coming from certain backgrounds or certain localities, in the hope that this won't even be a necessary intervention at some point.
Right. Yeah, I love that. So let's talk a little bit about music. We talked about how you initially got involved in music. How did you? You got into music as a producer. So how did you make that transition? Or I wouldn't even say transition. How did you add a lyricist to your repertoire?
Yeah, so I always mention this to folks that I didn't really grow up listening to a lot of hip hop. I mean, out here in upstate New York, it's like 4% is black people here. It's not many of us. I was usually the only little black kid in most or many of my classes.
Okay.
I didn't listen to a lot of hip hop. It's a lot of kind of, country alternative rock out here. But, I got what I got from MTV, and I listened to what I could. I got, when I got into high school, that's when the Mos Def came my way, and Talib Kweli and some of those folks. But I didn't feel like this is something that I could do. It just was like, this is amazing music. Wow. But then right before I went into undergrad was the first time that I heard Kanye West. And that changed my whole life because I felt like I appreciated his honesty. I appreciated that he kind of vacillated back and forth between being egomaniacal and being really insecure and being open about those things.
Right.
And he was funny and charming and interesting to me. And I just loved that how emphatic he was, that everything he said, whether he was wrong or not, he believed it, I was into that. So
right.
At that time, production-wise, I was like, okay, I want to shift from making more video gamey sounding beats to chopped up samples, hip-hop, sounding production. And so that was how I started making those types of beats. And then I started rapping over them after I graduated from undergrad, and when I was teaching, I was, really depressed about the school system. I was feeling lonely in Houston. I was just kind of sad. So I thought, let me make music about how it's cool to be a nerd or like a geek, and maybe I can share that music with my students, and they'll be like, oh, cool, I want to pay attention to what she's saying or whatever. So I made an EP called Fly Nerd that was just about the other songs on the project are about my life and my relationships with things like, race, racism, God, etc. But the kind of standout track from that project is a song about being cool it is to know nerdy, geeky things, basically. And I was really surprised because even though I had made this project thinking about sort of my students, a lot of adults, a lot of grown people were like, yo, that's my experience too. I'm a geek and I love all these. I love Ninja Turtles. I love, all this stuff. And it's cool to hear someone, particularly a woman of color, talking about this stuff. That's really dope. You should, kind of keep doing that. And so I moved forward from there. And it was a therapeutic experience. It really was nice for me to be able to get my thoughts on the page, on a track. And I kind of kept moving from that point.
Interesting, and I love this song where you mentioned I don't know if it's called Genius, but I think it's called Genius. Where you even mentioned, you talk about Kanye West and how it's funny that song to me it and from my interpretation of it, it's it's more about. Yeah, Kanye West is like this genius, but it's more about, people trying to take that away from him and us and how they try to downplay our intellect and our genius. So I thought that was a really cool song. So,
Thank you.
I mean, you touch on so many things in your music: sexism, racism, underrepresentation in comics. Your childhood, your relationships, anxiety, coping with life in academia, self-worth, all this stuff.
Yeah.
What's your? Let's go back. So how you mentioned, how you got into how you started talking about kind of this nerdy. And so how did that kind of evolve from that towards making more music about gaming and tech. Is that something that you like consciously do now? Like, you know, hey, I'm going to make songs about gaming and about, you know, nerdy stuff.
Yeah. So it was definitely not a conscious decision. So, you know, as I mentioned, I kind of grew up playing games and watching certain cartoons and you know, being in these worlds. And through my academic life, I'm involved in science and technology studies. So these are the things, you know, as a hip-hop head, you know, you can attest to this, that whatever's around you, that's your reference point. Those are the references that you make. That's what becomes important to you in your music. So those are the punchlines, et cetera, et cetera. So I was drawing from all of that stuff in order to make the points that I was making. And I think, you know, I was doing it with enough sort of frequency that people started to be like, wow, this is like, you know, this sounds like a nerdcore music, or this really, really speaks to geeks and nerds in a way that I think, you know, at least in contemporary hip hop, I feel like there's a lot of examples of folks who will make nods or say, you know, have lines that will reference certain cartoons, comic books, and video games. But, you know, my stuff will talk about it a lot. So I think I was being seen in the same light as artists like Mega Ran or other folks who really, really draw on these ideas. But it wasn't really a conscious choice. I mean, I did release a project in 2014 that was specifically about the video game Metroid, from which I get my name. And that, I was like, this is a video game-centered project. You know, I'm going to chop up beats that are samples from that game and stuff like that. But the rest of it, video games and cartoons and tech, that's a way for me to just explain and share, you know, the other stuff that I think is going on, what you talked about, like sexism, racism, anxiety, mental health, all of those things. So it's just the framework I kind of use.
Excellent. So, like I said earlier in the show, like I think your writing ability is insane. How
Thank you.
I mean, just going like today, I was listening. I was just the way that you link words together and your rhyme schemes, all of that stuff. What is your process, your music making process? Like, take us through. Like, you know, do you get the beat first, or, you know, do you start with the subject and then, you know, maybe you start with the rhyme scheme and you carry that scheme? Like, tell us about that process.
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, I think it can be all three. So on the most recent project, Pieces in Space, I think I've done some variation on the three things you said. So at some point, for some songs, and this is probably the most often I'll have a beat, or I'll work on a beat and then kind of build bars around that. Because I'm more comfortable as a producer than I am as a rapper, since I've been doing it for a little bit longer. So, you know, I'll formulate a beat, and, you know, you can probably speak to this as well as an MC, but the beat almost kind of guides how you put words together. Like, it helps to shape your flow a little bit. Some beats, you know, can't work with a certain flow, will not work with certain beats. So that structures flow-wise what I'm going to do. But in terms of the content of the song, you know, I'm a very emotional person. I cry a lot. I get worked up pretty easily. So usually when something works me up a lot, I know that I need to sit down and write, or I need to like rap this out or something. And something is inside that needs to come out of me. So most recently, what I'm working on right now are songs for my next project. And I'm working on a song about praise and recognition and my weird relationship with needing to be praised. And that came about because on my last project, you know, I got a lot of love for it, but I also got rejected by a lot of publications. And you know, I was pissed. I was really mad. And so I sat down and I made a beat and I just wrote every single thing that I was thinking and feeling at that time, and, you know, kind of revised it over time to make it into a more coherent thing. But the initial thoughts and the initial like feeling behind it came from me being really angry one night and feeling like I was being snubbed. So yeah, I'll just kind of follow an emotional breadcrumbs and see where that leads. And then with the rhyme schemes, I think once I have the idea or the concept, then it's almost like a puzzle. Like you almost, let me think of a word that means this but rhymes with that, and it's just like playing Tetris with words. It's just fun at that point.
I like that analogy, playing Tetris with words. Hey, if you feel the need to mention any of those publications that snubbed you on this show, feel free. We'll put people on. We'll put people on blast.
It'll come out the song.
Oh, okay.
As soon as I have this track together, I will send it your way because I'm not. I was mad.
But I mean, I seen your website. I mean, you're getting a lot of praise as well.
Yes, I'm grateful for that. And part of what the song is talking about in my own neuroses, and I think something that other artists and folks will relate to is that, we're perfectionists. So many of us are like, we're doing great or we're doing well, but even that little bit of, I didn't get this or I didn't get that, it can make you mad. Or people who have, high profiles on the internet, they'll be in a really great place and someone will send them one comment. Some like nobody who just got on Twitter for the sake of being a troll will send you something and it'll mess up your whole mood. So it's like a weird relationship that we have with negative news and negative information.
And what's the song called? I think you touch on that a little bit with what is it called? Comments Disabled or?
Oh, yes. So Comments Disabled is definitely my track for internet trolls, right. If anyone wants to check that out.
So, speaking of gaming and tech, years ago when, N80, shout out to N80 from Dual Core, started getting into making hip hop music about gaming, about tech. Like I had no idea that there was an actual genre of hip hop called nerdcore. How do you feel about the label nerdcore hip hop?
So I've had kind of a back and forth relationship with the label nerdcore. Like as we were talking about earlier. My references to video games, cartoons, etc. is pretty organic, and it seems to me that that's the case for most artists in nerdcore. I haven't ever met someone who is only talks about games and cartoons for the sake of, having fame and acclaim or whatever. Like there's no person I know who does that. Everybody is coming from a very genuine place.
Right.
But it was frustrating for me because I felt like a lot of the content that I was talking about was being glossed over because it was like, oh, neat. She talked about Sonic the Hedgehog, and I'm like, that's cool. But I also talked about, police shootings in this country. I also talked about, rape culture and all of these things that I want people to, I want the entryway for some folks to be games and cartoons, but I don't want it to stop there. And I think that can happen when somebody sees that it's nerdcore. It's like they're just listening for the cool reference to, Metal Gear Solid or something like that. So it was a little frustrating for me at first to navigate that label. Yeah. And so for some time I started calling my music Afrofuturistic, which is a term that, it means a lot of different things, but at least the way that I'm using it is to it's a form of art that tries to envision Black folks in new and weird spaces. So imagining myself as a video game character, inserting myself in these different comic book worlds and other spaces where Black folks are not necessarily seen or viewed or are portrayed in non-complex ways. So I now recognize, though, that the term nerdcore, it also does have some power. It is a way that folks can identify what I'm doing, and that will be the way that they start to think about the important things that I'm talking about. If that's the way that they need to kind of make sense of what I'm doing, then fine, as long as you take in everything that I'm talking about, I'm fine with it.
Right, and I love, I love that statement. It's funny because I actually recently just started writing, right? And and while writing, I was, kind of torn, or really just, wondering, like, what direction should I go with this? Like, are people ready to hear, really, really personal things, even though it's infused with, nerdcore culture, but are they ready for that?
Right.
And I just found myself saying, it doesn't matter. That's what they're going to get. And, and, I'll make the references and things like that, but they're going to have to, they're going to understand kind of what background, what my backstory, and how that led to me being here right now, right? So they're going to have to take all of that along with all of the references that they want to hear, if they want to listen to this music. So
and I think that's important. I think when I first started out, I was really anxious because I was being invited to perform at video game conventions and stuff like that. And I was like, oh no, I don't have that much material that's strictly video gamey. Are they going to boo me off stage? But I think that was me being unfair and not recognizing that, of course, even in this context that we're celebrating video games, people still want to hear real life stories, genuine stories about, triumph and heartbreak and all of the things that make video games so great. They're going to want to hear that in a song too, whether it references, Princess Peach or not. So I think now that I have that mentality, I feel a lot less restricted about what I can and can't talk about.
Excellent. And I'm trying to find the track real quick. The song that this is off the Pieces in Space album, Perfect Dark.
Okay. Oh yeah.
So when you talk about using these kind of nerdcore type references, but also explaining something's having a more serious subject behind it, I thought that's a perfect representation of that, because you mentioned you talk about comics, but you also talk about underrepresentation and people not looking when we look at comics, we don't see ourselves reflected in the heroes and in the characters. And I thought that was that was real fitting for what we were just discussing. I think that's pretty dope.
Yes, thank you.
So tell me, who are some of your influences in music and tech and life?
Yeah. So music-wise, I mentioned Kanye West. I I think as most people do, have a contentious relationship with Kanye West. His music, his whole essence is awesome. I cannot deny the influence that he's had on my life, regardless of where he's at right now. And I also really liked Bjork as a kid because she's a weirdo. Bjork and Missy Elliott are influential to me, not necessarily sonically, but in the sense that they were women who just clearly did not care about what society thinks women should do and act like. They just would dress and act however and not be afraid to be all up in your face. Or I love their whole swag. Really made me feel like, I can be, this is powerful. It's powerful stuff. Let me think who else musically. I really like, there's an MC named Open Mike Eagle. And he's a really, he's someone who I think has done a better job of navigating this kind of nerd geek rap space than I have, because he's never really attached, he's never sort of seen as being in one place or the other. I think he moves kind of fluidly in a lot of different rap spaces, and he's a really neat MC. I like how he talks about things. Mega Ran or Random, he's an MC that I've gone on tour with 2 times or 2 or 3 times. And he also, he kind of does what I do, but from a different perspective. He's also a teacher, a former teacher. And there's an MC named Homeboy Sandman, who is probably one of my favorite MCs. on my last project actually, but he's very, he's someone who helps me to study like how different flows basically. He has very interesting rhyme schemes and interesting flows. It's really dynamic, and he's someone who's not afraid to kind of try things. He tells stories. He does things where he'll just play with one particular rhyme scheme for a whole song and stuff like that. Helps me to kind of try it on my own. Like, it's been a nice kind of template for writing. So those are folks that musically, I mean, I could go on and on forever and ever, but I think those are the, some interesting people who have influenced me. And then you said tech-wise.
Yeah.
Tech-wise, Tatiana King-Jones. I don't know if she's been on the show already, but she's part of a podcast called The Fan Bros Show, which is like a black geek podcast. And he also has I think a thing called Tech Talk with Tati. She reports on and talks about cool gadgets and gizmos and things that are coming out in the tech world. And she's a woman of color. She's brilliant and really fun and funny. And just a good person to follow. So I think she's on Twitter. You can check her out. Another person is a young woman named Kaya Thomas.
I actually think that, I know I haven't met Tatiana, but we've corresponded through email.
Oh, cool.
I think we're actually trying to get her to write some articles for Blacks in Technology to be on part of our media team. So,
yeah. Yes, and cool. And another one is a young black woman, Kaya Thomas. She's a developer. She's super young, and she developed this app called Do, which is like an app that shares books about and by people of color. And she's just and also she's a superstar. Another person is Scott Hanselman.
I know Scott.
He's actually one of the. Yeah, he's the truth. He booked me for OzCon Open Source Convention to like do an opening kind of performance, and he's just been so supportive of me and so many other folks, people of color who are in the tech world, and he's really somebody that I look to kind of inspire me and even just point me in the right direction sometimes. He's just a really great person to know. He knows so many people, and he knows so much about so much stuff. So those are the three kind of tech folks. And then life-wise, I would say my mom. She's a professor. She's a professor here at Cornell in the Africana Studies department, and she's just a boss. Like, she taught me from a young age that as a girl I can do whatever I want. And she was honest and real about the kind of struggles that I would face as a black woman in this country. But she's just set such a powerful example for me about what it means to do something and do it well and take pride in it. And then the other person I would say is my partner, who's he's on a flight to Rome for a teaching program. But he's published 4 children's books that are about kids of color they play basketball. They also do weird stuff, and I'm super inspired just to watch him kind of do what I'm doing, but in the literary world.
Very nice, very nice. Shout out to moms.
Yes, moms for the win.
Yeah, and Scott Hanselman, I'll tell you what, Scott is, I met Scott some years ago at South by Southwest, actually. But oh, wow. Yeah, he knows everybody that I know. He actually, I was in San Francisco, I think back in, I want to say September or October. And we've hung out, before at conferences and things like that. And, he was trying to, tip his frequent flyer miles or something like that, like over $1 million or so. It was something crazy. And Jesus. he was like, hey, I'm did he say he was already in San Francisco? He lives in Portland, and so in order to go over, in order to go over like these frequent flyer miles, he had to get these so many miles in before this specific time. And so he was like, I just looked around and seemed like what flights I could take, and the one came up to San Francisco. And so like he was in San Francisco for maybe a few hours. He just took the flight in order to get these miles. And I met up with him and just chatted with him for a few minutes, and and he left to go catch another flight back. So yeah, he's a real,
that's what he does.
Yeah, he's real cool. So tell me, how do you, I mean, you've got so much going on, being a PhD student, being an artist, I know you've been touring, being an educator. How do you balance all that?
The quick answer is I do a very poor job of that. I'm pretty tired a lot of the time. But I am able to be strategic. So there are, certain times of the year that are better for doing things than others. So, for example, my most recent tour, I did that during spring break. So we had a week off for spring break, and then I took the next week off to do touring stuff. Or I use summers to do a lot of writing, recording, travel, stuff like that. When I don't have to be somewhere for a semester. And then I also will take opportunities that allow me to both, I'll go to a conference, and at that conference, not only will I maybe talk about some of my academic work, but I'll also perform. So kind of doing a 2-for-1 situation where I can maximize what I'm doing in academic spaces. So definitely being strategic about my time and my energy has been something that I've had to learn while trying to juggle all of these things. But, it's doable. It's doable. And especially as you get further in your PhD, you're kind of required to be in one place less and less. So there is some flexibility geographically with what I can do or where I can be at any given time.
Gotcha. And so... we have a few more questions before we get out of here. What do you want your fans to take away from your music?
I think if there's one thing that I want my fans to take away from my music, it's that that vulnerability can be powerful. I think there's a progression on my albums from sort of talking about broad issues. You talked about this earlier when you were talking about your writing process in terms of anxiety about discussing your own personal life stuff. And as I've progressed, that's the direction that I'm moving more and more in, really talking about personal things that I think about and using that as a springboard for folks to think about stuff that's going on in their own lives. I want people to recognize that there's power in being open and being vulnerable, in allowing people to see the kind of struggle and journey that each of us face, and that's fine. I think in this moment, especially with things like Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, it can be tempting to project a certain image of ourselves. Right. Especially I think for artists and for high profile people. But the most love I ever received was when I put out a track about having a mental breakdown. That was when folks were like, oh, okay, you're human. And so many people have emailed me, called me, texted me, and told me, your track about, losing your mind and not knowing where you were at was the thing that helped me to go seek therapy for the first time, or the thing that helped me to break up with a person who was, I wasn't supposed to be with. And so know that there's power in our stories, whether they're telling good things or not so good things. It always is a powerful experience, especially if you're a person of color. We need those stories more and more. Right,
and I want to add on to that because I had, like I mentioned earlier, I have a few brothers and they're into music as well. And one of my brothers, he's been writing, for years, and he was telling me basically about someone he was doing music with, and this person had said, like, hey, so and so, people said they ain't, they're not feeling, what you're writing and things like that, and so he started questioning himself, and I think it was because of the content that he was writing about, and I said, look, you concentrate on telling your story and making it personal. I said, because those personal stories are the ones that people gravitate towards, right? I said, if you look at, people can talk about money, cars, women, and all that stuff, and they may gain fans from that, but longevity is in people relating to you. I said, you look at all the people that are considered some of the best MCs and rappers. They have, even look at, people like Biggie and Tupac. You look at people like, Latifah and even Nicki Minaj. I said, the reason why people love these people, it's not just the pop hits that they have or the chart topping hits. It's because they give you a piece of them. And people relate to that and they gravitate towards that. And that's what they love. They love that vulnerability. They love them to be able to say, oh, yeah, he's or she is just like me. I've went through that. I've done that. I've experienced that. So I think, what you said is very, very real, very, very powerful.
Thank you. Yeah.
So what advice... you've had all these experiences. You've been on tour. You've made a lot of music. What advice would you give to your younger self?
To my younger self.
Yeah.
I would say, that's a good question. There's a couple things I would say to my younger self, but the most important thing that I would say is to follow. I was going to say follow your instincts, but I think I kind of did that. I would say to be better about saying no to things. I think that when I started off, I thought I had to take on every opportunity that was presented to me, and some were more useful than others. And I don't think I did a good enough job of thinking about to benefit me and what was just going to take time and energy from me. At that point, I just thought, everything, all exposure is good exposure. Everything that I end up performing or doing is going to be in the interest of getting better or practicing. But that doesn't matter if you're like exhausted or you're falling behind in your other obligations. So I think I would tell myself to slow down for a second and just really be more thoughtful about the opportunities that were presented to me, so that I could really, really be more intentional, so that I wouldn't, I was kind of burnt out at the beginning. I was really burnt out.
That's great advice. I mean, that's advice that people can carry across, not just in music, but a lot of things. I mean, I've had to go through the same things. Yeah. Even with running, the Blacks in Technology organization, it's like, sometimes you just have to say, like, that's not, no, because either there's too many cycles that's needed in order to be able to accomplish that, or that's just simply not a good fit, right? And that's just something that it's not going to be beneficial. So I definitely think that's great advice. And the question that you never ask someone working on their PhD, when do you defend your dissertation?
Oh no. Okay, so I'm writing right now. I'm writing all summer, and the goal is to be done by the end of this academic year. So by December, that's fingers crossed, and that's also assuming that I don't get distracted by music stuff, which is usually what ends up happening when I sit down to write. But I'm going to do my best. I haven't booked too many shows this summer. I haven't booked any tours this summer, just so that I can do dissertation writing and work on my next album and really be focused.
Excellent. And last but not least, how can people contact you, follow you? You know, your website, your Twitter. How can they buy the album? Or albums?
Yeah, so my website is sammusmusic.com. It's SAMMUS music.com, and all of my social media is Sammus Music. So it's twitter.com/Sammus Music, it's Facebook Sammus Music, Instagram. I don't have a Snapchat. I'm not one of those people who's like hilarious on the spot to follow. So I figured like I'm not gonna, but unless somebody wants to watch me like making dinner or something like that. So no Snapchat, but I am on the other platforms, and you can find my album on Bandcamp as well, or on my website. It's pretty easy to find. It's the latest project is called Pieces, spelled Pieces in space. And yeah, check it out.
Definitely. And I want to thank you again for being a guest on the podcast. This was very, very interesting. I really loved hearing your story. I have to say again, the people listening, go cop the albums, every single one of them. I'm pretty sure you're going to find something on one of the albums that that you relate to. I listened to Pieces in Space on the way home. Not that wasn't my first time. I've listened to it before, but I listened to it again just to refresh my memory on the way home today. And there's so much in that album itself that I can relate to, being a person of color and also being a nerd, a geek, and being into comics and things like that. It's a dynamic album, and you should you should definitely, anybody listening, go check it out, go pick it up. Thanks again. I really appreciate you. You coming on. Much success to you in the future, and definitely let us know when the new album drops. Let me know for sure, because I'm all over it. And we wish you well in the future.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening.
You do the same. Thanks a lot.
Bye.
And that's it for this episode of Blacks in Technology Bit Tech Talk podcast. Let me get that out of here. All right. We're still going, so how can I get that? There it is. All right, so that's it for this episode of the Blacks in Technology Pit Tech Talk podcast. I want to thank our guest, PhD student and hip-hop artist, Sammus, for joining us tonight. If you like what you've heard on our podcast, you have any suggestions or comments, email them to us at contact us on blacksintechnology.net. Until the next episode, good night, have a good evening, and tech yourself before you wreck yourself. Take care.
Blacks in Technology.
Blacks in Technology. Blacks in Technology. Blacks in Technology. Blacks in Technology. Blacks in Technology.